Gue, Deloise Deanna. This is language lesson number 8 with the Mi'kmaq Language Learners course on Facebook. Today's lesson number 8, is presented by Star Paul, Walalan Star, for another very insightful and thought-provoking lesson. This lesson comes from the book presented on your screen, The Language of This Land, Mi'kma'ki, written by Trudy Sable and Bernie Francis. And again, a very thought-provoking lesson. This lesson comes is a kind of a continuation from language lesson number 7. It's on the concept of the creator and continues to look at kind of the difficulties in the views between the early missionaries and the Mi'kmaq in relation to the creator and some of the language difficulties that the early missionaries encountered when meeting the Mi'kmaq. It was a very interesting lesson and a very interesting read, very insightful. Some parts I did find personally a little bit confusing, trying to get my head around it, because I am not a language person. But certainly a very interesting lesson, and I'm very looking forward to hearing everyone else's thoughts and viewpoints on this lesson. But two main difficulties that the early missionaries encountered when they kind of encountered the Mi'kmaq and the Mi'kmaq view of creation was, first of all, that they were faced with a view that looked at the universe as fluid and transforming. And we talked about this aspect in our previous lesson, language lesson number 7, in that the creator was ongoing, and the concept of the creator was ongoing, and it was a process. It was a process of creation, as opposed to very stagnant. So that was a very difficult concept for the early missionaries in encountering the Mi'kmaq, as well as the difficulty that the perception of God as potentially female or sentient it. That was a difficulty for the early missionaries to perceive that God could be potentially a female or potentially an it. In response to this, the early missionaries used the term Niskamij. That's the term that they adapted from the Mi'kmaq as a word for God, to communicate the abstract notion of God. They use the word Niskamij. However, in Mi'kmaq, Niskamij means grandfather, stepfather, and father-in-law. Niskamij can also be a literal term for kin relationship. So, as explained above, meaning grandfather, stepfather, and father-in-law, but it also is an honorific form of address. Okay, Niskamij was also used to address the sun, and this is where it kind of got a little confusing for me, but it was used to address the sun in that the Mi'kmaq their attribution, or they attributed the sun in providing the conditions to help support life and for things to grow. However, noted in this lesson was that this usage, this is my understanding, this usage, the usage of the term Niskamij to be an address for the sun, which the Mi'kmaq used, was incorrectly interpreted by the missionaries as impregnating the earth from which all life sprang. Now, that actually comes from, it's noted in the book, The Language of This Land, Mi'kma'ki, by Trudy Sable and Bernie Francis, but it actually comes from the reference from Leclerc, which was written in 1968, as well as Mallard, which was written in 1758. And both of those references are found in the book by Trudy Sable and Bernie Francis, The Language of This Land, Mi'kma'ki. So that was a little bit of a kind of an interesting, but also a little bit of confusing. I think I do have a proper understanding of that. And also interesting to note is that the missionaries ended up dropping the IJ, so the ij ending of the word Niskimij. And the word came to mean an unchanging masculine God. Okay. So they dropped that ending and it ended up becoming an unchanging masculine God, which is different from the Mi'kmaq usage, in that in our frame of reference, the creator can be masculine, feminine, or sentient it. So the words for creator, this is a little bit of a kind of review from our previous lesson. We did talk about in language lesson number 7 that the words for creator are not only they are verb based, okay? And we talked a lot about that in language lesson number 7, that there are actually, well, there were 4 different kind of processes given for creator. There are others, but there are 4 that we looked at in terms of the creator as being the one who creates us, looks after us, watches us, and is with us. But in addition to the creator being verb based, the term creator is also inclusive. Okay, so that means that when the Mi'kmaq use the term for creator, they actually speak to include the people or person they're speaking to, as well as others around them, so that the concept of God being one person, or being personally one, personally yours, or personally someone's, or the concept of God making any one person isn't really correct, and it doesn't actually exist in the Mi'kmaq frame. So that was kind of interesting. Another concept in relation is that because of this, it doesn't indicate whether something is animate or inanimate, or male or female. Okay. In English, qualifying the creator as a person or object, a who or that, doesn't exist. For example, gesulk could be male, female, or sentient it. However, in Mi'kmaq, an object can be animate or inanimate. The creator could be a machine. So the Mi'kmaq look at the creator as a sentient he, she, or it. So that's a very kind of, there's a lot in that lesson, but that is language lesson number 7. Sorry, lesson number 8, continuation of the creator. I still feel I need to kind of wrap my head around it, because there certainly was a lot presented in this lesson. Very interesting how interesting, but also kind of confusing. Got to work out all the kinks of how the Mi'kmaq perceive certain aspects, and how the missionaries perceived it, and then how the missionaries took their understanding and to come up with words to connote what they mean in relation to the Mi'kmaq. And it's very interesting, yet also kind of takes a lot to wrap your head around it. But certainly very, very interesting lesson. Star, I really have to thank you for taking these language lessons in a different frame, because I've had the book, The Language of This Land, Mi'kma'ki, for quite a while. And, I haven't really dove into it very much. But you're kind of breaking it down and allowing me to kind of look at one section at a time is really interesting. And then hearing how other people are working their way through that as well has really helped me. So it's really allowed me to kind of open up my view, because obviously learning the language is one piece, and how to speak and read it, but learning kind of the stories and the backgrounds behind why the Mi'kmaq people, um, you know, how they understood and how they perceived things are very different than, I guess, my own reality being, growing up in the Western world. So, Well Star for a wonderful lesson once again. And Well to everyone who will do this lesson. I'm looking forward to listening to them. Thank you so much. Well Namultus.